Hello and welcome back to my channel after a longer break. I was on vacation, which was actually very good, but I also caught a little cold being in Asia and jumping from 30 plus degrees into fridge cold air-conditioned buildings actually gave me a bit of a cold, and my voice hasn't quite recovered from it yet, although I'm already getting better now. So hopefully I'm going to be able to do this video without coughing and a dry throat, but yeah, we shall see. Anyway, so first video of 2020. Oh no, it's actually not. I have already made one. Anyway, one of the first videos, the first tool of the trade video for sure, is the Apsoft Airplane Toolbox freeware, which you can download, as you can see here, from the forum. And it's actually a pretty nifty tool. By the way, if you click on download, what will happen is it will bring you to this Google Drive. Pick the respective version for Windows, for macOS, and for Linux. In the manual folder, you'll find a manual. You should download this. This is not included in a zip file. And there is actually a patch out. So the version for Windows was 1.9.3, I think. And the patch actually brings you to 1.9.3.1. There had been some small changes. Not sure if they really are relevant. And what you can also do is in profiles, you find a number of predefined X-Plane 11 specific profiles that have been collected. Actually quite recent here, as you can see, for the Zibo, for the TOLIS, and also for the flight factor, Boeing 757. All right, so this is how to get it. You basically unpack all the zip archives in a folder, and then there is a batch file. And when you run this batch file, it will start the toolbox. Now, this tool in theory can be used for any aircraft. So there is no specific connection to X-Plane. It can be used for FSX and prepared as well, because it is a kind of performance calculation tool for aircraft and not for a specific simulator. Obviously, it makes sense that you have fitting values for the airplanes that you use. So you need to rely on having a profile, as we will show you in a moment, that you have a profile that matches your airplane. Now, if you are in the simulation thing as long as I am, you may actually have got yourself a tool called TopCat. TopCat is a payware. I think it's still available. It's made by the same people that do PFPX. And it is actually a tool that does kind of similar things to the airplane toolbox, because what you can do here is you can define yourself profiles for specific aircraft. For example, here the Hapag-Lloyd Boeing Alpha Hotel Foxtrot Bravo, which we use in the world flight scenario. And here you can set up certain types of aircraft. So TopCat is around here for a very long time. And what you basically can do is you can set up your flights, like the parameters like weights and fuel. You get your zero fuel weight and your CG and all kinds of other things. You can produce load sheets from this, and you can also calculate the takeoff and the landing performance. That is actually what the AP Toolbox is all about. So with the AP Airplane Toolbox, you can actually calculate your takeoff and landing performance. All right. So just to give you a bit of context, it is actually something that you could use instead of TopCat, and because it's freeware, you don't have to pay for it. Now, if you have installed everything, what will happen is you will see a number of predefined profiles. So the developer has put in a lot of profiles for Embraer jets, the Tupolev 154, Boeing 767, Boeing 757, Airbus. And you can see already that obviously, or at least I think, the developer uses X-Plane, because he also then created variations of those profiles for the flight factor 757 and the A319 from Tolis, and obviously the Zibo. This is actually, I've tried myself, by the way. So in order to work with one of these profiles, you select it. So let's select the B737-800. And next page is actually a settings page. You wouldn't be here too often. So basically what you do is performance metric runway, so that it actually displays the performance metrics. Slope. If you run with the runway follows contour, you should turn this on, because then I'm not sure what information it uses, but then it would consider also slopes of the runway for the calculation of the takeoff performance, I guess, and possibly also the landing performance. The weight unit is in kilograms. You can switch this to pounds. Your SimBrief username, and then you can actually connect with SimBrief. This is an offline database data source. The thing is, when you install this for new, what it will do is it will build a database of airports and runways, because it doesn't come with a database. I think it's downloading it from somewhere, possibly the server, I don't know, and it will automatically create a database for you. By the way, in order to kind of limit the search results for airports, that's the way I understand this page, you could actually define that instead of getting even the smallest grass strip, you could actually limit the tool to medium and large airports, or large airports only. So if you're planning to fly with a 777 or the bigger birds, you could actually use something like this here. Okay. And what you can also do is you can define that you shouldn't be shown, or the search results probably shouldn't show airports with runways less than the minimum length and less than the minimum width of the runway. Don't forget to use save here in order to save this. All right. What you also can do is you can go into the so-called airport editor. In this field, you enter an airport, you get the data that is known about it, like the airport elevation, continent, Germany is the country. And when you switch over to runways, it will actually show you the 4 runways it found. And what you can also do is, if you select the runway, you have to do that yourself, but you can go and you can create entry points. And the entry points, they are basically the taxiways that lead onto the runway. And what you can do is, if you have the information, let's say from the Navigraph chart, for example, for the TORA takeoff range available. So, for example, when we take off direction 08 left, and I would enter the runway at A6, I would have 2,200 meters left for the takeoff run. And obviously the tool would then try and calculate if you are actually able to make it. Okay, so this is actually quite fancy. You have something like that in Top Cut for the takeoff, but if you calculate the landing distance available, LDA, you can also use this to say, I want to exit at, let's say, Alpha 6 when I land. So how far is that from from the threshold? And that means you can calculate your brake distance in order to be able to say I would need auto brake 2 or auto brake 3 in order to make it to slow down in time to meet A6, for example, something like that. So it is actually possible. Problem is these are all empty, so you need to go and set them up for your airport. I've started here with these two, but yeah, it is a bit of work. And also, I'm not always sure these values here. It needs the Torah value, but it doesn't need the LDA. So I haven't really been calculating the LDA for all those. But in theory, it's possible. That's a nice touch. Don't forget to save when you make changes. So that was that. Then comes the profile. Now there's a little bug here. I have a feeling it could be that first and last custom profile cannot be edited, although it should be. There are files, they're XML text files, so you can actually go and modify them outside. The other ones do work, yeah, but just not the first and the last one in the list or something like that. It looks like it's a little mishap here in the way this is programmed. So I could actually go and make changes to these values here. You see what he has set up. So it's a Boeing 752. Engine type is a Pratt & Whitney 2040. And then the maximum takeoff weight in kilograms and pounds, the landing weight, the maximum zero fuel weight, and the max fuel. So how much fuel can the aircraft take? Obviously, these numbers are then used for the calculations later on. Okay, so that is if you want to add or modify custom profiles, which have to be based on one of the base types that he has in his software. Next is the tool. Now that is something that just helps you calculating certain things. For example, we are in Munich, and let me quickly, 1487 feet, okay. If the current QNH is, for example, 1000, all right, so the barometric setting is 1000, or you get in the 80s, you hear that the QNH is 1000. The QFE, which is the field elevation, so it's the pressure that you would have to dial into your altimeter, into your baro settings, if you want to get the field elevation, which means the altimeter shows 0. So if with QNH of 1000 I want to read 0 on my altimeter, I would need to dial in 947 as the barometric setting. That's actually quite nice. Feet to meters, and also, by the way, the other way around, okay? Pounds to kilograms and vice versa, nautical miles to kilometers and vice versa, and knots to kilometers per hour or meter per second, or vice versa. All right, so quite handy. All the most important calculations. Now here are a number of things that are disabled for the moment. Now what you can do is there is an ACARS page. Now there are two things you can do here. Either if you use SimBrief, this is actually linked to SimBrief at the moment. If you use SimBrief and you use the SimBrief downloader and you also download the SimBrief XML file, which contains all the information from SimBrief, and you have that locally here, you could actually drop this file here. It's kind of cut and paste or like drag and drop. The other thing is if you have given the link to your SimBrief, it will actually load the active flight plan, which I have created one. And now you can go into info. You've seen that these two have actually come online. And it will show you all the information that it reads out of this flight plan, the operational flight plan. Amongst others, it's the fuel calculation from SimBrief, which says 4081 should be our block fuel. And it also defines what our takeoff weight, zero fuel weight, takeoff weight, planned takeoff weight will be 58371. And the zero fuel weight, the planned one is 54517. All these things will be needed. We are flying from Munich to Nuremberg. It's just a sample flight. Cruise system with CI, the cost index of 35. The ground distance is 88 nautical miles. The average wind based on the weather report of the flight plan, by the way. This is not the current. So if you create a flight plan in SimBrief, this is now already a day old. I actually did this video before, but then unfortunately my voice cut out. So I'm doing it today again. But that is good also because I have actually played around with this toolbox a bit more. And therefore I have a bit more experience now with it, which is probably good for the video as well. Average wind, average ISA, average tropopause, and so on. So it takes this all from the data, and here you see the routing via the input 3 echo, departure, Yankee 102 to Upala direct, and then we land, yeah, depending on. And the suggested altitude is, yeah, and for that you can actually go here as well, by the way. You can see what the suggested flight level is, 140. Mora is basically, what was Mora again? I forgot again. Is it, yeah, I forgot. I knew yesterday, I forgot today. It's early in the morning, by the way. Okay, Mach, wind, and so on. This is all stuff that comes from the SimBrief stuff. So if you look in your operational flight plan, that's exactly what you see there as well. This is quite nice that you can see it, but it's, yeah, you can't really do anything with it. And it's not exactly bang on when it comes to readability. And so it's a huge table with lots of values, and you need to be, so you wouldn't use this for in-flight planning, by the way. Now, should your SimBrief, and it took me actually some time to find out what that is, but now I think I understand. Should your SimBrief operational flight plan or data file contain a weather report with significant weather, with SIGMETs, then this would come alive here, and you would actually see significant meteorological conditions and things like that. Okay. I haven't seen this because this particular flight plan at the moment in Munich, it is really calm. So yesterday too, it got a bit colder. There is supposed to be some kind of storm coming. I've looked at windy.com, and it looks like we're not going to see anything before Monday here in Bavaria. And I think we here in Bavaria will be not as much touched by this storm, but the west of Germany and also the British Isles are already, I think, suffering heavy winds and gusts. So yeah, that would probably show up here, but that is more for information and purpose. The real purpose of this tool is here. It's these two little aircraft symbols pointing up or down. And that basically allows you now to calculate your takeoff performance and your landing performance. Now, we're taking off from Munich, and it automatically put in the Echo Delta Delta Mike for that because it comes out of the flight plan. Now, here you can select a runway. Obviously, before you select a runway, what you might want to do is get your weather. Depends on if you use the built-in weather from X-Plane, you use NOAA. If you use Iveo or VATSIM for online flying, you should probably pick the corresponding weather source so that it matches. In most cases, NOAA and VATSIM and Iveo are pretty much the same, but not always. There are some time delays and time differences. So although I think ultimately the source is NOAA, also for VATSIM and Iveo, it could happen that VATSIM and Iveo have not exactly the same weather reading at a particular time. Okay. So it makes sense to use the respective server if you're online. I'm going to use NOAA, and you can see we have currently -3 degrees. A barometric setting of 1024. Variable winds with 1 knot. It's CAV okay. Yeah, it's true. Actually, I look outside, and that's one of the reasons why we have minus temperatures. It got a bit colder now again. Although in the north of Germany it has been really warm. I think even above 10 degrees. It's really strange winter weather, thanks to global warming. Anyway, so since we have variable winds, we are actually basically free to choose a runway. What you would do is if you fly online or something, you would probably choose a runway that is active. Okay, so use ATIS or whatever in order to find out what's the active runway. Select the active runway. Now, if you have done like me and you selected these entry points, you could use one of them. For example, if the ATC controller, the VATSIM or the IVEO controller, tells you that is it okay if you have to take off from, let's say, A6, all right? That would calculate that we have a TORA of 2,200 meters, and we need to now calculate if that is actually sufficient, or under which conditions I might be able to do this. All right. So I can choose A6. I see that I need 2,000. I have 2,200 meters available, and now I need to see how much do I actually need. So here you can say is anti-ice on or off. Now in our case, we would probably do engine anti-ice because we have no clouds, but it is minus, so it's below 10 degrees. So you would definitely activate the engine anti-ice. The flaps, you could either let it choose or pick a particular one. Let's leave it on optimum for the moment. The engine bleeds remain on. We are not that heavy. And it's not that warm. And the thrust, again, you could actually select a combination of deration, also with the flex temperature, or one of the engine ratings. So there are takeoff 1, takeoff 2. There are fixed ratings, and you can select that in the FMC, and you would then kind of match this. So I use optimum and let it calculate. The takeoff weight we've got from the flight plan. Make sure that your aircraft in the simulator has the same. And that calculates all this here. The payload is 13,104, and the zero fuel weight, that means the complete weight without the fuel, is 54,517. The block fuel is 4,081 kilograms. The FMC MCDU reserve 2,819. So this is and then the PSR. Okay, so anyway, here you can't enter anything. So I think we've set up everything we need, and then I press on this little calculator symbol, and what it will do then is it will tell us we should take off with flaps 5. We use the standard 26K takeoff with a selected temperature of 34 degrees, which gives us an N1 of 93.7. The takeoff range that we require with these settings is 2,194 meters, and the margin is 6 meters. So I think it is pretty obvious this is not a go, right? So I'm using all here, and now that looks a bit better because it means that we have now a margin of 1,384 meters left. This is what is left on the runway, and you need to have enough runway left. 6 meters is certainly not enough. At least I wouldn't feel very comfortable. MTOF means maximum takeoff weight. It's just a check. So we have 65.5 kilograms for the maximum takeoff weight under these conditions. But we are definitely below that because that's the planned takeoff weight. So 58,371. And that gives us the V speeds. Now, I know that the Zibo, for example, calculates the V speeds itself. You can choose then if you enter these values. Actually, we have now a select the temperature or a flex temperature of 49 degrees. All right. Which gives us a V1 of 130 knots, rotation of 132, and V2 of 139. And that's all you need really for your takeoff briefing. So I think this is a fantastic tool. But we're not finished yet because we have also the other side. Let's take Nuremberg. Nuremberg, we have 10 and 28 as runway. So I'm pulling the weather. Wind comes from 120s with 6 knots. So I would say the natural choice is runway 10. I have no profiles. What you can now do is you can actually use, instead of having these predefined entry points, you could actually enter, if you know that a particular entry is, let's say, 1,500 meters from the threshold, you could actually put in 1500. So, and what will happen then is it will do the same calculations. It will actually tell you how much runway it requires, and you can check if that matches with your LDA. So you could actually try and find out what is my brake setting and my speeds and so on, and my flap settings, in order to reach, let's say, a particular exit. So that's what pilots do a lot, because they want to make sure that that they do not overrun, let's say, a certain, either because ATC says they should be exiting by a particular exit, the latest, so they calculate how much distance is it to that exit, and what do I need to do in order to be able to make it, and if not, so that they know that they can't make it and not even try. Okay, I think this is great because Top Cut allows you the departure side of things, so it has these points predefined, but it does not allow you to do the LDA. So the landing is always based on the full runway in Top Cut, the payware tool. Here, I actually have the possibility to calculate things like the exit I want to go off. Again, flaps you can either pre-select, or you use the optimum. The reversers at the moment are both. You could choose not to have reversers. Autoland, we're not going to do an autoland in this case. And this is actually the planned landing weight. Now what you can do here is, this is the landing weight that SimBrief thinks that you will have based on consumption and so on. Now when you're in flight, you would normally, around your top of descent, you would normally start also the approach briefing, and what you can do here is, normally from the top of descent down in normal flights, Nuremberg is not that normal, it's very short distance, so it might not be a typical one, but in a typical flight of at least 150 to 200 nautical miles, where you actually get to a decent altitude and then return, your top of descent, the time when you start with the descent until you arrive at the airport for the landing, in a Boeing, for example, is roughly 400 to 500 kilograms. So what you for fuel. So what you can do is you could take your whatever current gross weight you can see in the FMC, you deduct about 400 to 500 kilograms, depending a little bit on the routing, and that gives you an estimate for your landing weight. Don't forget, it doesn't have to be exact. It just has to be ballpark. You know, it needs to be in and around the same. And in that case, you would then enter a value here, unless you completely rely on the SimBrief, because SimBrief is quite accurate, but it might not be realistic because your flight might turn out a bit different to what SimBrief has calculated. Okay, so that's why you always run this when you're in the air and at the top of descent, and you would use this to calculate your approach. Okay, and then same thing, you click here and it tells you. So we are using a flap 30. By the way, flap 40 I think are not used in the Boeings that much. I think on average the landings are with flaps 30. The landing altitude in Nuremberg is 1050. You can use this to set up your landing altitude at the top, at the overhead panel. The maximum landing weight is 66,361. Just compare it with what you calculated as your planned landing weight. Just make sure that it's not over that, because then you're overweight. That could be a problem. That's the approach speed 144 and the reference speed 139. It's these two mainly that you would use. The reference speed is usually what you touch down with. The approach speed is what you would be using on the final part of your approach. And now here's an interesting one. What it does is, and that I'm not so sure about, it calculates what your auto brake settings will give you with reduction of speed and estimated need of runway. Now, as you can see, auto brake 1 and 2 are, there's nothing here, which means that in theory with auto brake 1, you will not be able to stop in time for the 2,700 meters. Well, maybe with auto brake 1 that's true. Auto brake 2, I'm a little bit surprised, because I think in Nuremberg we can stop with auto brake 2. The thing is, you may want to not stop at the end of the runway. You might want to have a bit of margin, or you even want to get off the runway earlier. And obviously you would need to reduce the speed a bit quicker. So for that, they suggest at the moment that you use auto brake 3, which means that you have a brake distance of 1,565 meters, which means you have another 1,135 meters left on the runway. Okay. And if you use auto brake max, which is really rarely used, only under really difficult circumstances, it's 1,121 meters you require, which means you have 1,579 meters left. Yeah, as I say, I'm a bit surprised that AB2 and AB1 are not producing any values, but I guess there's a threshold that it calculates, and we seem to be below that threshold. Maybe, could be, okay. If you do manual braking, that means you do not have auto brake set. It probably calculates that when you do manual braking, you're probably really pushing it on the pedals. Which means with manual braking, you can achieve 875 meters without flying off the runway. And that gives you 1,825 meters left on the runway. So, yeah, if you really want to push it, you may want to not use auto brake and make sure that you brake yourself. These values should actually change depending on the runway conditions. So if there is water on the runway, if it's wet or snow or icy, I'm pretty sure these should look completely different. Yeah, as I say, my briefing doesn't have that kind of thing. So what we can do actually is we can go to manual weather setup. Yeah. And what we can do now is we could say we have moderate rain. Visibility is, let's say, 5,000 meters, which is still okay. It's still, yeah. Anyway, and the wind is 120 with 6. Yeah, let's just see what happens when we have rain. Now, the runway condition is wet. There's even the option now for wind shear that you could activate. And now let's calculate, and we can see that now even the auto brake 3 setting has disappeared. So in theory, I can only brake with auto brake max, because all the other brake settings wouldn't give us enough braking action to make that, whatever it is, threshold. Now I bear to not agree with this. Maybe it's realistic. Maybe it's not too realistic. Maybe that threshold isn't quite right. So I'm not sure. Usually in a Boeing you do not use auto brake max, and especially not when you have a wet runway. So it would actually mean that we would probably use manual braking according to this. Maybe. But that doesn't really make this software bad. It is still a great tool, especially for the average simmer who is not putting too much thought into this. And it gives you an easy way to get your numbers, you know, and to get an idea of what's going on and what you should watch out for. So again, same thing. You get your weather here in Frankfurt. I have Frankfurt as an alternate. It doesn't make sense when you fly from Munich to Nuremberg to end up in Frankfurt, but I didn't care. I just let it in. And here you have loads and loads of runways. And again, yeah, so 25 right, for example, is 2,800 meters. Munich is quite large. 25C is 4,000 meters. And 25 left is also 4,000 meters. Yeah. So plenty of space. To land, the weather is pretty similar, around 0 degrees with variable winds and good visibility and so on. And now here we could do the same thing. We could calculate a nut. Actually, under these conditions, we have a bit more choice, because we could use auto brake 1 and would stop after about 2090 meters. Okay, so that's it. That's the airplane toolbox. I don't want to drag it out much more, but that's also actually everything I can show you about it. Read the manual. It gives you some instructions, especially if you want to know what these all these things are here, these acronyms and so on. They're explained in the manual, so don't forget to download the manual, because they're not part of the zip file. Right, I hope that was useful to you. And yeah, my first video now, my first Tools of the Trade video for 2020. And I hope that was helpful. And I would say then until next time.